So one time I was at a birthday party talking to some people that I had never met before. And they were like, what do you do? And I was like, it's kind of weird. Like, I work at this museum and I wear a wig and an apron and I pretend to be a 14-year-old girl. And they both look at each other and then they look at me and they go, oh my God, are you Victoria Confino? And I was like, yeah.
It was like too on the nose for me, this job. Like, I have a background in improv, I have a background in history. All I want to ever do is just be a different character. So the fact that I could just, for hours on end, basically do improv was just like everything I've ever wanted.
So the Victoria Confino program is a costumed interpretation program at the Tenement Museum in which a group of 15 visitors get to meet an actress playing a Sephardic Jewish immigrant, Victoria Confino, in the year 1916.
Imagine that you could go 100 years ago and knock on a regular person's door and just ask them how their day has been. I'm performing a real person who really did live in this building.
She is from Castoria.
But above that, she would have identified as Sephardic.
Victoria immigrates with her family. She worked as a seamstress.
Victoria was a singer.
She was 14, so she was constantly...
She and her family lived in a building on the Lower East Side, 97 Orchard Street.
And their story is the story of many.
There's 3 planes in researching Victoria. There's it was so. In other words, her name was Victoria Confino and we have documents to prove it. There was it must have been so. So it's like Castoria is on a big lake, so Victoria probably went swimming growing up. And then there's also it might have been so. So there's like Victoria might have liked going to Coney Island with her friends. Victoria might have gone to the Nickelodeon and thrown, scraps of food at the screen when she didn't like the movie.
If you are on your period, like Victoria's on her period. If you have cramps, Victoria has cramps. If you're pissed about something your friend said earlier, Victoria can totally be pissed about something her friend said on the stoop earlier.
And it also felt really exciting to provoke something from people, to provoke genuine emotion, and also to create a space where people did feel comfortable sharing. There was this reciprocal intimacy.
A school group, a religious school group, 6th graders, Muslim, all girls came to meet Victoria. And they're all leaning over and okay, Victoria, what are your dreams? And I don't think anyone has asked Victoria what her dreams are. I have not experienced that in one of my programs. And I said, well, this might be really silly, but because I've only gone to school for 2 years, but I really want to be a teacher. And I thought that was just gonna be okay, next question. And they all looked at me so seriously and they're like, Victoria, that is not silly. That is not a silly thing to say. And it was so surprising that I started crying like I am obviously right now. And I couldn't believe it. They didn't let it go for maybe 3 minutes where they're like, that is not silly. You can be a teacher. And then they were like, Victoria, do you talk about these passions with your mom? I was like, no, but I guess I should.
I believe at any one time there's usually 11 women playing Victoria. There's really no ownership over Victoria, the role, any stories we told, that it really feels like this collective shared story. There's something so fun when you get to hear somebody tell a really brilliant story or handle an interaction in a really thoughtful way that's they're so good.
Everything that I would do in that apartment is 100% built off of what somebody else had started. And one of the things that this woman who I observed used to do that I loved was she would open the door, walk down the hallway to the stairs, and yell up to see if the landlord was there, right? So I just decided, I was like, oh, I'm definitely doing that. And I would just yell out, Mr. Rosenblatt! And then I'd wait, and I'd wait, and I go, I don't think he's here.
Sephardic Jews are a population that had a really specific reputation in the 1910s in New York City. They were in a lot of ways quite a maligned group of immigrants. Yeah, it's a little weird that like a white blue-eyed person was playing Victoria.
We want to talk about identity and we want to talk about difference. And so who I was and what I looked like was part of that and like fit into the program. I remember there was once this all-girls school in the Lower East Side who came, and it was all like black and brown girls. And I opened the door and they just like gasped and like started looking at each other, and we're kind of like, wait, what? And it was a moment I actually identified with in a way of not seeing myself a lot, and what it felt like as a kid to be like, oh my God, that's me. Like that person looks like me.
Even though I've lived in this country for most of my life, I didn't consider myself an American. I considered myself Colombian. Working as Victoria, I started to think about like who gets to decide that they belong. Like at what point do you belong?
If people would ask me if I was happy here, and if the answer was no, people could get really upset about how much better this place was than where I was coming from, which like I think I took a little personally because like I said, Castoria is like a 3-hour drive from where I'm from. Nothing about like why my family moved from Greece to America was about like Greece being like so much worse than America. Like that wasn't a factor. And I guess like it felt like there was a lot of hostility about Victoria saying that that's not why she came here.
It's hard to explain why I feel so connected to her. She's not my ancestor, but like she really feels like she was my ancestor, which is like a very strange thing.
There is something about living inside of a person for so long where they get like in you, they get like grafted onto you. And in a way, it's kind of also like you sort of better understand yourself.
I started playing Victoria, and then I immediately left my really long-term partner, came out of the closet, and just started being like gay and chaotic around town. And sometimes my friends would think it was so funny. They're like, Jim, isn't it funny that you're like at the lesbian bar and then you go to work and you play this 14-year-old girl? But it actually kind of makes sense to me because Victoria was like emerging into adulthood, into this new world, kind of at the same time that I was emerging into a new world. So it actually felt really nice to be going through these like huge moments of growth alongside Victoria.
One of the first things I learned from the Victoria community was like, these people have my back, because I think we all uniquely understand like how delicate and special and complicated this thing is.
To have a group of people who are so passionate about the work that they sit around in their free time exchanging ideas, that improves the museum, that improves people's experience visiting it. And that was really underappreciated.
For what we were expected to do as an educator and as a Victoria, yeah, there is no match for the pay.
And we loved it. And that's how they paid us, was in fulfilling work. But you can't pay your rent with fulfilling work.
So in March of 2020, the museum closed operations, furloughed its staff.
And then by July, we were laid off. All at once.
It's very precious, and I know that the other Victorias feel that way, and it doesn't feel comprehensible that I won't be in that situation again.
It was a job that I did for money, and it's a job people have left. Like, other people have played Victoria and then chosen to go on to do other things. So it is weird how sad it makes me feel to think of never playing Victoria again.
A thing that I used to do that I took from another Victoria, which is Rebecca. People would ask where the landlord was, and she would go into the hallway up to the staircase, and she would yell up the entire staircase, 5 floors, and she'd yell for Mr. Rosenblatt. She'd be like, Mr. Rosenblatt! And I started doing that. And like, who's gonna teach the new Victoria? It might be lost, that nugget.
I don't think that institution's framework and the way they treat the people who work for them is sustainable. I mean, it's been proven that it's not sustainable. It's also been really interesting to see in myself and in other people how much we want to protect institutions over living people who work for those places.
It felt kind of radical for me to claim this identity of an American. Or Colombian, we gotta hyphenate it, right? Colombian American. I think that's one of the most long-lasting changes that playing her has left.
I think that in moments where I felt I was really able to be vulnerable and even connect with somebody else around, like, have you ever felt different? Like, was just, was really impactful for me and transformative, I think, in some ways, to allow myself to be vulnerable in front of others like that.
And the last day, I remember all of our Vickies were canceled, and there's 4 Victorias at the museum, and we all just decided to dress up in our costumes together. I think with the subconscious awareness that we would never be her again.
I don't like the idea of her getting relegated to a history that, like, forgets anyone who wasn't, like, wealthy and important. I think that's, like, one of the most powerful things about Victoria's story. And all of us telling her story is that she was just, like, an ordinary person.
Dorme, dorme, mi angelico, mi chico chico de tu nación, criatura de Zion. No conoces.
I'm Alexia Antoniou, and I played Victoria Confino.
My name is Genevieve Simone, and I played Victoria Confino.
I'm Nicole Daniels, and I played Victoria Confino.
I'm Rachel Cockrell, and I play Victoria Confino.
My name is Estefania Giraldo, and I played Victoria Confino.
I'm Rebecca Miller, and I played Victoria Confino.
I'm Jimmy Faye, and I played Victoria Confino.
Dorme, dorme, criatura de Zion.